So,
all right. So we have to look at, there are many methods out there that people have come across to create their nano layers. And today we're just going to focus on the hot caustic bath method. In later workshops, we will detail other methods, but today we just wanted to bring across sort of a very important method that people need to use and understand why they are creating their layers. Before we start, it's always very important on how you treat, once you've created your nano layers, on how to treat them. So I wanted to start off with this very first, because we have to realize that, and these are really, really delicate layers that we are creating. And so when you are handling your nano plates or your copper coils that you've created, is to really use gloves and only touch the real edges, and to not move your box around while the process is going on during the nano layering. And just to try and give you an illustration of how really delicate these layers are, you know, we've all, as kids, we've stuck our finger onto those tiny little ice crystals in the freezer. So if you just imagine your nano layers are like that, so every touch you are damaging tiny little layers of your nano. So if you bear this in mind, then you realize how delicate one has to be to handle this material. Okay, so let's start off with our copper. To start off with, we do have a list of materials that one needs to put together. Please bear in mind when you're doing this, preparation is key, to have everything organized and prepared before you even start, because it's no use trying to run around and look for things when you're halfway through something. So one needs is a pair of gloves, very essential, chemically resistant gloves, not any cotton gloves or any other type of gloves. Safety glasses, a plastic box with a lid, and then you will need your caustic soda or sodium hydroxide, and then potassium hydroxide, chicken wire mesh, wire cutters, your copper plates or wire, or any other thing you're wanting to, copper device you're wanting to nanocoat, and a scale to be able to measure how much caustic soda you're going to be using, and a measuring jug for your water. So these are the things that one has to put together first.
Regarding safety, I read here, so please read your material safety data sheet according to your country's regulation when you buy the caustic material, and take care of what's there, and keep the instructions. So you have to know that caustic soda, it's not a toy. If it touches your skin, it causes burns. If it touches your eyes, it can cause blindness instantly. So, but if you are handling it with care, you will have no problem. So all we learn to handle fire, but we don't put our hand in fire. So same with caustic. If you know how to handle it, it's no problem. When you use it, protect your body. So don't be barefoot or in open sandals, for instance, in flip-flops. Use shoes and use a clothing which can save your skin in case accidentally you would drop a tool or would splash out a little of the caustic liquid. And it's very good to have at hand a bucket full of water, just plain water. And if you have any drops on the floor or on your body parts or your cloth or your furniture, just use plenty of water to wash it out. Don't use immediately vinegar or other acid to neutralize it, because if you have a little caustic on your skin, if you add some acetic acid like vinegar, you can cause, besides of a caustic burn, also an acid burn. So just wash thoroughly with water every spill off or every drop which goes nearby, and do it in a quiet place without children or pets nearby, and not be surrounded by people who would distract your attention. Take care, and it's safe to use caustic in that case. But safety first.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sandor. Okay, so yeah, safety first. So always use your gloves, and as Sandor said, have water available to wash off any spills and splashes, because as much as we try and be very careful, things and accidents do happen. So rather be safe than sorry. Okay, so in the preparation, first of all, you have your plastic box, and now we need to create your chicken wire base that will fit into the bottom of your plastic box. So all that one has to do is to take some chicken wire and then cut it to the size of your whatever plastic box that you do have. And just bend the edges of your mesh over, creating a 1.5 or 2 centimeter folded edge. And you just repeat this process on the other side, and eventually you just do it on all 4 sides. So you're creating a sort of a nice box shape, and then that will fit into the bottom of your plastic container. So this is very easy to do, no problems. Right, now your preparation, this is very important when you're preparing your copper plates or even your coils. And just to come back to what we had discussed on the nano layering in the previous episodes, is that at this stage you're just dealing with the copper in a matter state, and so your atoms are all really tightly packed together.
I add here a simple idea which you can keep in your mind. When you do a nano layering of the copper, it's different when other kind of nano layering which are used in industry, where they do deposition by atomic layers or in vacuum or chemical vapors and so on. So when they add something like we add a paint to a surface, here we make the layers from the copper itself. So it's like a kind of process like like when you make popcorn. So you have tightly packed atoms, and then you add an extra energy which makes these atoms to pop up in a different shape and different structure. It's literally like when you make a popcorn.
Yeah, that's why we try and use the term sort of nano layering and not nano coating, because the term nano coating then implies that we are putting something on top of the copper, but we're not, as Sandor explained. Okay, so if you've got your copper, whether it's your copper or it's your wire coils that you're wanting to nano layer, or even your spinning devices that you have, you need to make sure that they are of the highest quality and purity of copper. Cut them to size that's going to fit into your box with the lid closed. And your plate thickness can vary. If you're wanting to make your plates for your GaNS materials, can vary from 0.5 mm to 3 mm. The thickness is not important. Okay, there are 2 options to prepare your plates. The first one is, if you do have some tools at home, is to drill a small little hole on the 2 corners of your plates, and these holes can be used to hold your plates during the nano layering process, as well as when you're wanting to use them to produce some GaNS material. The other option is one can just cut into the plates and then bend over small little edges, and then you can use these little edges to hang your plates. So whichever is going to be easier for you, either option works very, very well. You need to clean your copper surface very well, get rid of all the oxidation. Your oil, your fingerprints is all oily and will interfere with the nano layers. So one has to be very careful and clean your material before you place them into the box. Okay, so now we've done all our preparation, and now we can begin creating our nano layers. Now, as a sort of basis standard formula that one can use, Sander has found this one working very, very well, is we're using 40 grams of sodium hydroxide with 10 grams of potassium hydroxide per 1,000 milliliters of water. So yeah.
Let me add here a little thing. The presence of potassium is very important.
Okay.
So when you buy your caustic soda, sometimes you find its chemical composition that it has, let's say, 90% sodium hydroxide and something is, the rest is something else. If accidentally it contains potassium, it's fine. But usually we add potassium. You can use potassium hydroxide or you can use a potassium salt, like a potassium chloride, that you can get from any chemist, pharmacist. It's a product which is called no salt in some countries, or salt without sodium. It's a dietetic supplement, so it's easy to buy from any pharmacy. If you cannot get potassium hydroxide due to local restrictions, in that case, you can add some quantity of potassium chloride. Potassium is important because a tiny part of the potassium of the nature, 120 parts per million, it's made up of isotope potassium 40, isotope 40 of the potassium, which manifests a so-called beta decay. So it emits some kind of ionizing radiation at a very, very minute rate, which makes it not harmful at all. So some radiation is needed even for life to be able to function. But that little sparks are giving that extra energy which is needed for this popcorn process to occur. So you can use, let's say, 10% of potassium or 30% of potassium. It's up to you. This recipe just was found that this is something which works in most of the cases. So you can use a little more or a little less. You can experiment, but if you use this ratio, your success will be 99% guaranteed.
I have a question, Sander. I did not understand how the importance of using potassium. Why is it needed in terms of nano layering?
Yeah, look at how cells divide into the body. The division of cells needs some radioactive material, which is usually cobalt, and you can get it in the form of cobalamin. In other names, it's vitamin B12. So vitamin B12 is usually produced in the guts of man or animals and so on. So your body produces it naturally. But that vitamin B12 is needed for the cells to be able to divide. The similar vitamin is the folic acid, or vitamin B9 in other terms, which has the same action, but it is much stronger and it's needed for the fetus to grow. So now Mr. Cash has studied for a long time how to find such a material which is slightly radioactive to give that little scintillation for this easy nanocoating process, and he found potassium. Potassium in the nature contains a very tiny amount of isotope potassium 40, which is unstable. So it means it has a longer half-life. I don't remember by heart. You can look up in Wikipedia how many, 1,200,000 years, or how much it needs to reduce its radiation to half. But all potassium in nature contains that little amount of isotope, which emanates some beta radiation, and that's that one which gives the little spark for this process of nanocoating to occur.
What does it give? The last sentence, please repeat.
A little spark or a scintillation.
Why do we need the spark? I mean, doesn't NAOH itself alone, without potassium?
No, it's a big difference between success and failure if you have some potassium present. If you have no other source of potassium, you can extract it from ashes, from vegetal ashes, from ashes of hardwood. You can just make to collect some ashes from the fire of wood. You can clean it by sieve. Then you put it into the water, you leave it for a couple of days. When you filter it, you can boil it to evaporate some water, and you get a potassium carbonate or a potassium ash, which is called potash. So that contains potassium. You can add that too to the caustic soda.
Okay, so explain in very simple terms what addition of potassium hydroxide does in terms of nanocoating layering. Just gives it a sparkle?
It initiates a nuclear process. It's a nuclear science, don't forget that.
Why is it needed in nanocoating?
For that division of the atoms from the substrate, from the piece of copper to occur. Same like you get the division of the cells in a living body in the presence of the radiation of cobalt, which is contained in vitamin B12.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the potassium hydroxide enhances nanocoating.
Yes. It's a huge difference if you have some percentage of potassium present or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Just recently I saw a knowledge seeker from Eastern Europe who made new nanocoating. He tried to make a new nanocoating, but he got a very pure sodium hydroxide, but he didn't add any potassium. And surprisingly, he didn't succeed. Probably when he used the less pure sodium hydroxide that also contained, among other additives or impurities, also some potassium. And now he had something without potassium, and he was wondering why the copper plates were still shiny after he made the process and they didn't change their color. So remember, a little potassium, it's crucial. It's
Wonderful.
like the vitamin for your body, for your cells to be able to divide. Can we go further?
Yes, thank you, Sandor. A lot of valuable information there for everybody.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got your mix, and you can then just sprinkle that onto the bottom of your plastic container evenly to cover the whole bottom. You can then place your plates onto the mesh at the bottom of your container. And just another point on when you're placing your plates, if you can, it would be preferable to position the plate at a slight angle or even vertically, because if the plates are laid flat, then we may observe the pattern of the mesh imprinted on the plates. So it just depends on your size container and how you would like to do it. But ideally, you'd want your plates to be standing upright. Then you need to place your lid onto the box, leaving a small opening. And then you need to pour the boiling water into the container. Now, this is where you need to do a bit of preparation, in that you need to know how much, once you've got your plate in there, you need to know how much water you need to place in there to make sure that your plates are fully covered with the water. So it's best to just measure beforehand with the cold water, see how much water you need. And if you need then 2 or 2.5 liters of water, then you can then know and measure how much caustic soda one needs to place into the bottom of the container. So that all depends on your size of your box and the size of your parts that you're wanting to nano layer. So, but there, here you have to be very careful when you pour your boiling water in the container, because you're going to get hot steam from your hot water as well as from the caustic. So at this stage, be very careful, and also not to breathe any of the fumes coming off. So you need to pour enough water in there so that you covering your copper plates completely, and then immediately close the box with a lid. And even if you just put your kettle straight back on there or anything else, just so that you can trap that steam in your box.
One of the things I did with my container is I drilled a hole in the lid about 1 inch in diameter, maybe 1.5 inches, so I could attach my lid, get it secure, and then I used a funnel to pour my boiling water through the hole, and that hole then was much easier to cover than dealing with the whole top of the container.
That's a very professional setup, if you can do
Very
it.
good. Yeah. Thank you, because it is a lot safer as well. So thank you for that. Okay, so once you've closed your lid, you leave that box for 48 hours. Do not open the lid during this time, because what you've created in that box is a caustic environment around your copper. All right, the next step is your drying. So after your 48 hours, if you're just doing one single plate, it is a lot easier. You need to remove most of your caustic water from your box. If you do have many plates there that you are trying to nano layer, then one just has to try and remove that caustic with a syringe, because you don't want to really disturb or fiddle with those plates, because you'll be starting to damage any of the nano layers which might be starting to form. And then one must always just leave a small amount of the liquid caustic in the box. So you don't pour everything out, just leave that small little amount that will sit at the bottom of the box.
If I may add here
Yes.
something. So both ways are correct. You can do like in the picture, just to pour out the caustic liquid from the box, but it is much easier if you can manage to use a pipe to siphon out, to pull out the water without disturbing the entire box. If you have a fish tank or a friend who has a fish tank, look how you take out the mud, the water from the fish tank without turning upside down the whole fish tank. So later, in the questions and answers, I can show my the principle of the method I use usually.
Oh, very
Thanks.
good. I use a siphon as well, and if it's a smallish plastic tube, you can just fill that with water, and then when you stick one end into the caustic, your finger in the other end, you get an automatic siphon without having to suck it.
Yes, I use exactly the same method. So you have your box with caustic on the table, and you have under the table a bucket, for instance, or another recipient. where you pull out the liquid caustic. It's a very good. It's a very easy and good method. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
That's important, especially when you are not nanocoating just 1-2 plates, but when you have a bunch of them. When you do this on a higher scale, it's much easier than moving out carefully so many pieces one by one into another box and so on.
It does minimize your handling, so yeah.
Exactly, and you don't touch so much the surface, which I told at the beginning. It's so important to be careful how we handle these very sensitive newly created nanolayers. So at this moment, when you take out the water, usually your copper plates stay shiny metal color until they are